Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alexis Monroe, and what you're about to hear isn't just another story. It's the kind of journey that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family, betrayal, and justice. I went from being a 16-year-old girl, pregnant and thrown out into the rain, to standing in a courtroom fighting for my son against the very people who abandoned me. Grab a cup of tea or coffee, settle in, and stay with me because in the next few minutes, you'll see how a life can fall apart and rise again in ways you won't believe. And if you don't want to miss any part of this journey, make sure to hit subscribe right now so you can follow along to the very end. My name is Alexis Monroe, and the night my life shattered still plays in my head like a movie I can't stop. I was only 16, sitting at the kitchen table with trembling hands, staring at the positive test I had hidden in my backpack for days. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my mother's voice when she asked what was wrong. I whispered the truth, just hoping they would hug me, or at least sit down with me. Instead, my father's chair screeched back across the linoleum, his face twisted with a rage I had never seen before. "You've ruined this family," he spat, slamming his fist on the table. My mother's lips curled, not in sorrow but in disgust. They didn't even ask who the father was. They didn't ask if I was scared, if I needed a doctor, or if I had anyone to talk to. They just unleashed every ounce of shame they could muster. The words burned into me. "You're no daughter of ours." Nye. I remember standing up, tears blinding my vision, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as if it might hold me upright. Outside, a storm had started. The windows rattled as thunder rolled in. My father disappeared into the hallway and came back with a black trash bag. He threw it at my feet. "Your things," he said. My things? It was just a few clothes, a cracked phone, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. My mother opened the door. Rain whipped across the porch. "Leave," she hissed, like I was something dirty to be washed out of the house. I begged just for one night, just until morning, but their eyes were cold stone. The bag was heavy in my arms as I stepped outside. The door slammed behind me with a sound that felt like a lifetime closing. Water soaked through my hoodie instantly. Cars hissed by on the street, but none slowed down. The porch light flicked off. For a moment I stood frozen, my entire body shaking, my stomach twisting, one hand instinctively over the tiny life inside me. That's when it hit me. I was 16, pregnant, and homeless. No plan, no money, no family. Just me and a child who hadn't even been born yet. The betrayal pressed down like a physical weight. Heavier than the bag, heavier than the rain. I wanted to sink right there into the puddles and disappear. But somewhere under the shock, a small ember glowed. A voice I didn't recognize whispered, "This isn't the end." I didn't know then what that voice would lead me to, or how far down I'd have to fall before I could rise. I only knew I was walking away from the only home I'd ever had, into a storm I couldn't see the end of. Stay with me because this story doesn't stop at tragedy. Hit subscribe and follow me into part 2, where everything begins to change. Rain dripped from my hair into my eyes as I dragged the trash bag down the street. I didn't have a destination. Every house looked closed. Every window glowed warm for someone else. The bus station was open all night, so I ended up there, slumped on a hard plastic bench between a flickering vending machine and a man asleep under a blanket of newspapers. The smell of diesel and old coffee filled the air. I pressed my hand to my stomach and whispered, "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do." Those first nights blurred together. I tried calling a few friends, but their parents said, "Not tonight," or didn't answer at all. Nobody wants a pregnant runaway sleeping on their couch. I learned which convenience stores would let me use the bathroom and which clerks would tell me to leave. I worked odd shifts at a diner washing dishes for cash under the table, my belly hidden under an oversized hoodie. The tips were tiny, but I saved every coin in a plastic bag. The loneliness was worse than the hunger. People avoided my eyes, like my shame might rub off on them. I'd sit on the edge of the station platform at 3 a.m., watching trains come and go, thinking about jumping on one and never looking back. Sometimes I imagined knocking on my parents' door, begging again. But the memory of my mother's hiss, "Leave," stopped me cold. One night, after my shift, I walked out into the parking lot and almost collapsed from exhaustion. My knees buckled. A stranger in a blue raincoat caught my arm before I fell. She was older, with silver hair pulled into a bun and a badge on her jacket that read, Legal Aid Clinic. "Honey," she said softly, "are you okay?" Nobody had asked me that in weeks. I wanted to lie, to tell her I was fine, but instead tears poured down my face. She led me to her car and handed me a granola bar and a bottle of water. We sat there in the quiet while I tried to explain between sobs. She didn't flinch. She didn't judge. She just listened. Before I left, she pressed a card into my hand. "Come to this address tomorrow. We have programs for young mothers. We can help you finish school." When she drove away, I sat on the curb staring at the card like it was a lottery ticket. My hands shook. After weeks of feeling invisible, someone had seen me. A tiny flicker of hope pierced through the heavy fog. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first brick in the road that would carry me out of the shadows. Stay with me because in part 3, you'll see how that single encounter lit a fire in me that no one could ever put out. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The clinic smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paper forms, but to me it felt like the first real roof over my head in months. The silver-haired woman from the parking lot, Miss Carter, became my lifeline. She signed me up for prenatal care, helped me file for temporary housing, and pushed a stack of GED practice books across the desk. "You're smart," she said. "Don't let this moment define you." I studied at night on a donated cot, belly rising like a tide beneath a threadbare blanket. My wrists ached from dishwater, my eyes burned from reading, but for the first time, I had a plan. I would finish school, I would find a job, I would give my baby a life no one thought possible. Labor came early, in the middle of a storm. The shelter's lights flickered as contractions ripped through me. There was no family in the waiting room, no hand to squeeze but my own. The nurse's voice was a blur, "Push, honey, push," and then a cry sharper than thunder filled the room. They placed a tiny, red-faced boy on my chest. His fists opened and closed like he was already reaching for the world. I looked into his dark eyes and something inside me broke and healed at the same time. The shame, the hunger, the long nights at the bus station, all of it condensed into a single vow. "You will never feel the abandonment I felt." Not for a second. My tears soaked his blanket. "I'll protect you," I whispered. "I'll build something they can't take from us." That night, I didn't sleep. While my son dozed in the plastic bassinet, I wrote lists on the back of hospital forms, GED exam dates, part-time job leads, childcare options. Each line was a rung on the ladder I was determined to climb. My hands still trembled from childbirth, but my pen carved the paper like a blade. 2 weeks later, I was back at the shelter, baby strapped to my chest, flipping flashcards in one hand while stirring formula with the other. People stared, but I didn't care. Every snide comment, every whisper of "teen mom" became fuel. Miss Carter pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "There's an internship opening at the county courthouse. You'd be perfect." I almost laughed. Me? In a courthouse? But she filled out the application anyway. When the acceptance letter came, I held it like a lifeline. For the first time since that stormy night on the porch, I felt the ground solid under my feet. I didn't know it yet, but this courthouse would become the arena where I'd one day face my parents again, not as their disgraced daughter, but as someone they could never control. Stay with me because in part 4, you'll watch me take my first steps inside those marble halls and turn survival into power. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. When I first walked into the county courthouse, pushing a stroller with one hand and clutching a manila folder with the other, I felt like an imposter. The marble floors gleamed, the lawyers swept by in tailored suits, and the echo of my sneakers sounded like a warning. But Miss Carter had been right. The internship wasn't charity. It was a test of grit, and I had plenty of that. I started in the records room, scanning dusty files and running coffee. Most interns disappeared at 5. I stayed until closing, baby carrier at my side, memorizing the language of motions and appeals. I learned to read case law like other people read gossip magazines. I could see patterns, injustices, loopholes. Something inside me clicked. This wasn't just paperwork, this was power. Days blurred into nights. I would leave the courthouse at dusk, work the diner until midnight, then rock my son to sleep before cracking open my GED prep books. My hands were raw, my eyes rimmed with red. But I refused to quit. Every whisper of, "She'll never make it," became another step up the staircase I was building in my mind. The first time a judge asked me to summarize a file out loud, my voice shook. But by the third week, I was briefing clerks, drafting templates, even correcting junior attorneys. People started noticing. One afternoon, Judge Ramirez called me into chambers. "You have an instinct for this," he said. "Finish your GED, go to college, apply to law school. You could do more than you think." He handed me a brochure for a scholarship program for single mothers. I stood there, stunned. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I thought of my parents' faces when they had thrown me out. The hiss of the rain. The slam of the door. My stomach turned, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was a surge of possibility. I took the GED in a trembling haze, my son on my lap in the waiting room. When the passing score came in the mail, I laughed until I cried. Then I filled out college applications. The acceptance letters came back like dominoes falling. With each envelope, the walls around my old life cracked a little more. Those years weren't easy. I juggled classes, internships, daycare, and double shifts. I missed parties, sleep, and sometimes meals. But every night when I tiptoed into my son's room and saw him sleeping safe and warm, I felt stronger than any storm my parents had thrown me into. I didn't know it yet, but I was no longer climbing for survival. I was climbing to fight not just for me, but for everyone who'd been where I'd been. Stay with me because in part 5, you'll see how that climb turns into real power, and how the girl they threw away becomes the woman they can't ignore. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. By the time I graduated from law school, the courthouse no longer felt like marble walls and cold echoes. It felt like home turf. I had walked those hallways as a girl with a stroller and a stack of books. Now I walked them in a tailored suit with my own nameplate on the door. Alexis Monroe, family law attorney. The early cases were small custody disputes, restraining orders, guardianship paperwork, but every single one mattered. I represented mothers who had been silenced, fathers trying to do right by their kids, teenagers like me who had nowhere else to turn. Each client's story was a mirror of my past, and winning for them was like winning for the scared girl I used to be. My son, Jordan, grew up in those hallways. He would sit at the back of the courtroom with his homework, or watch me argue motions, eyes wide with a kind of awe that melted me inside. He had my stubborn jaw, and my father's dark hair, but not my parents' bitterness. He was kind, curious, thriving. Everything I'd sworn he would be. We lived in a modest but bright apartment near the park. The fridge was full, the bills were paid on time, and I even had a little savings account marked future with his name on it. Sometimes at night, when he was asleep, I would stand at the window and look at the city lights, feeling something like peace. I had clawed my way out of the mud, brick by brick, and built a life no one believed possible. But under that peace was a quiet pulse of anger I had never fully let go. I donated to shelters, mentored teenage mothers, funded scholarships in secret, trying to reach back into the darkness and pull others out. Yet I never once called my parents. Not on birthdays. Not at Christmas. Not even when my name appeared in the paper as one of the youngest attorneys in the state. They had thrown me away. That door was locked. Until the envelope arrived. It was a thick white envelope delivered by courier on a Tuesday morning. My paralegal buzzed me. "There's a man here with papers." I signed automatically, thinking it was a new case file, but when I slid it open and unfolded the first page, my breath stopped. It wasn't a case file, it was a petition. Petition for custody, filed by my parents. They were suing me for my own son. For a moment, the room tilted. All the years of work, the long nights, the courtroom victories flickered like a dying light bulb. My hands shook as I read the allegations. Unstable upbringing. Unfit mother. Emotional neglect. Lies built on top of old wounds. I looked at Jordan's photo on my desk. The girl they had disowned was gone. In her place stood a woman with the law on her side, and a fire in her veins. Stay with me because in part 6, you'll step into the courtroom where I turned their lawsuit into my battlefield. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The day the court date arrived, I sat alone in my office, staring at the summons until the print blurred. For a few seconds, I wasn't attorney Alexis Monroe anymore. I was the 16-year-old on the porch with a trash bag. The old fear tried to creep back in. The hiss of the rain, the slam of the door, my mother's cold eyes. Then I exhaled. No, that girl was gone. I called Jordan into the living room that night. He was 17, now taller than me, with the same stubborn chin. I held the petition in my hands. Your grandparents? They're trying to take you from me, I said quietly. His eyes widened, but he didn't flinch. Mom, he said, voice steady, they don't know who you are now. You're going to crush them. Hearing him say that lit a fuse inside me. The next morning, I flipped the switch from panic to strategy. I wasn't just a defendant. I was counsel. I filed my own response to the petition, then opened a fresh legal pad and wrote at the top in big letters. This time, the truth. Days became a blur of depositions, affidavits, and late nights combing through old records. I dug up school transcripts, shelter intake forms, prenatal appointment logs, every shred of evidence that showed I had raised Jordan alone and built him a stable, loving life. I called Miss Carter and asked if she'd testify. Her voice cracked on the phone. I'd be honored. Might. The gossip mill churned as the case hit the local news. Estranged parents sue successful daughter for custody of her son. Commentators speculated about my past, twisting details to sell clicks. For a moment, it stung those old labels of teen mom and disgrace, rising again. But then I looked at the thick stack of motions on my desk and felt calm. This wasn't shame anymore. This was ammunition. On the eve of trial, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, straightening my navy blazer. My hands no longer trembled. I thought about everything they had done to erase me, shame me, break me, make me disappear, and realized this courtroom would be the place I finally put it all on record. Not just for me, but for Jordan, and for every kid who'd been thrown out into the rain. When the bailiff opened the heavy oak doors the next morning, the courtroom buzzed. My parents sat at their table, older now but still radiating the same chilly entitlement. They wouldn't even look at me. Fine. I walked past them, heels clicking, and took my place at counsel's table. My legal pad was open, my exhibits neatly stacked, my witnesses lined up. As the judge entered and called the case, I felt an almost electric stillness inside me. For the first time in 20 years, we were in the same room, but this time I wasn't the girl begging to stay. I was the one holding the law. Stay with me because in part 7, you'll witness the trial itself, the cross-examinations, the secrets revealed, and the moment everything breaks open. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The first day of testimony felt like stepping into a slow-motion thunderstorm. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, buzzing with whispers and camera clicks. My parents sat stiff at their table, legal team at their backs, eyes fixed straight ahead as if I were just another case file. But when the bailiff called Monroe versus Monroe, a ripple moved through the room. I rose, smoothing my blazer, and addressed the judge in a voice that didn't shake. Your Honor, my name is Alexis Monroe, and I will be representing myself. There was a murmur from the gallery. I caught Jordan's eye. He was seated behind me, chin lifted, and the tremor in my chest turned into a steady drumbeat. Their attorney opened with a polished narrative. Teenage pregnancy, instability, questionable influences. He painted a picture of me as a reckless child who had endangered her son. My parents nodded solemnly like saints. I took notes, my pen biting into the paper. When he finished, the judge turned to me. Miss Monroe? I stood. Let's talk about abandonment, I said quietly. And then I began. I introduced the shelter intake forms, the prenatal records showing no family contact, the affidavits from social workers. Miss Carter took the stand and told the story of the rain-soaked girl she'd found in a parking lot. The courtroom stilled. I called teachers, employers, even Jordan's pediatrician. Piece by piece, the glossy picture my parents had painted cracked. On cross-examination, I asked my father, "Did you attend a single doctor's appointment?" "No." Did you send $1 for food? No. My voice sharpened. Yet you claim I'm unfit? He shifted in his chair, eyes darting. My mother clutched her purse and looked down. I could feel the gallery leaning forward, breathless. This wasn't just legal argument anymore. It was 20 years of silence breaking. Every question was a nail pulling loose from the coffin they had tried to bury me in. By the third day, their attorney's objections had lost their sting. Documents they'd hoped were sealed surfaced. A former neighbor testified about hearing the shouting the night I was thrown out. My parents' composure cracked, their faces flushed, voices rose. The judge's gavel rapped for order. As closing arguments approached, I stood in the center of the courtroom, Jordan's photograph projected on the screen behind me. Your Honor, I said, this is not a story about mistakes. It's a story about survival. About a child raised with love by a mother who had nothing but gave him everything. And about grandparents who abandoned both. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. Justice isn't custody. Justice is truth. The judge recessed for deliberation. The gallery buzzed like a hive. I sat down at my table, exhaling for the first time in 3 days. My hands were ice cold. Jordan reached out from the row behind me and squeezed my shoulder. Everything we had fought for now balanced on the edge of one ruling. Stay with me because in Part 8, you'll see the verdict, the fallout, and the moment of true freedom. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The courtroom fell silent when the judge returned. Papers shuffled, a cough echoed, then even that stopped. I sat at my table, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went white. Jordan was behind me, a steady presence. My parents stared straight ahead, faces pale and drawn. The judge cleared his throat. In the matter of Monroe versus Monroe, regarding the petition for custody, the words seemed to stretch out forever. This court finds that the respondent, Alexis Monroe, has provided a stable, nurturing environment for her son. Petition for custody is denied. It was like thunder cracking open a summer sky. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then Jordan's arms wrapped around my shoulders from behind, and I heard the gallery gasp, then break into quiet applause before the bailiff called for order. My parents remained seated, stunned, their attorney whispering urgently but getting no response. I rose slowly, my legs trembling but my head high. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear. All the years of humiliation, hunger, and fear slid off me like an old coat. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was a reclamation of my own story. As we walked out into the bright sunlight on the courthouse steps, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Miss Monroe, any comment? How does it feel? Jordan squeezed my hand and I smiled, not the polite smile of a lawyer, but the fierce, honest smile of someone who has survived. It feels, I said softly, like freedom. Later that week, I visited the shelter where I had once slept on a cot. The walls were the same pale yellow, the smell of coffee and disinfectant unchanged. But this time I wasn't a client. I was a benefactor. I signed papers establishing the Monroe Foundation, a legal aid fund for young mothers fighting custody battles. Miss Carter hugged me, tears in her eyes. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. At home, Jordan sprawled on the couch with his college acceptance letter in hand. He looked up at me with the same dark eyes that had stared at me from a hospital bassinet 18 years ago. We're okay now, Mom, he said. More than okay. I went to the window and looked out at the city lights. The porch, the rain, the trash bag, those ghosts still existed, but they no longer haunted me. They had become fuel. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a force. I turned back to my son. We are going to help so many people, I said. No one will ever feel as alone as I did. No. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt a peace so deep it almost scared me. Not because the fight was over, but because we had transformed it into something larger than ourselves. If this story moved you, subscribe and stay with me. There are countless others like me out there, girls in the rain with nowhere to go, and together we can change their endings too. Stories like mine aren't just meant to shock, they're meant to shine a light. When you strip away the courtroom drama, the betrayal, and the headlines, what remains is a simple but urgent truth. No one's beginnings have to define their endings. Being disowned, abandoned, or underestimated does not make you unworthy of love or incapable of greatness. It can, if you let it, become the soil from which your determination grows. The first lesson is resilience. Alexis Monroe was thrown out as a teenager, pregnant and terrified, yet she refused to let that moment become her identity. Resilience isn't about never breaking down, it's about standing up one more time than you fall. Even in the darkest nights at the bus station, she held on to the idea that life could be different for her and her child. That small ember of belief was enough to guide her forward until she found real support. The second lesson is the power of self-advocacy. Alexis didn't wait for someone else to rescue her. She studied, worked, asked for help, and built skills that gave her a voice. By the time her parents tried to take her son, she didn't just have a lawyer, she was the lawyer. That transformation shows viewers that education, persistence, and self-discipline are forms of quiet revenge against those who doubt you. The third lesson is about turning pain into purpose. Instead of closing off after her victory, Alexis created a foundation to help other young mothers. That choice transforms a personal win into a collective good. It's easy to stay bitter. It's harder and braver to turn your struggle into a ladder for someone else. Finally, her story is a reminder about boundaries and forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It can mean releasing the hold that past betrayal has on your heart while still protecting yourself and the people you love. Alexis didn't let her parents back into her life, but she also refused to let their actions poison her future. If you've ever felt invisible, cast aside, or told you're less than, let this story be your proof that you can rewrite your narrative. You don't have to be born powerful to become powerful. You don't have to have a perfect family to build a healthy one. You don't have to wait for permission to fight for what's yours. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey. If Alexis's story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment about the lesson that resonated most with you, and share it with someone who needs hope right now. Together, we can make sure no one stands alone in the rain again.